Welcome back to an episode of Our Interesting Times. It's my pleasure to have Dr. Hans Uter on the show. Dr. Uter is a renowned ethnomusicologist and accomplished musician, composer, and author whose work bridges music traditions with deep explorations of sound and culture and consciousness. Tonight, we're diving into his compelling new article, FM Radio, The Occulted Frequencies of the Counterculture. In it, Dr. Uter examines the hidden influences and engineered frequencies behind FM radio's role in the 1960s and 70s counterculture, from its revolutionary promise of free expression to the subtle layers of cultural programming, sonic manipulation, and occulted power structures that help define and perhaps direct a generation. Hans, thank you for joining us tonight. Is there anything you want to add to that intro? Did I describe the article properly? Or
yeah, I think so. It's an article that I covered a variety of stuff. Yes, I guess so. Did you read it? You read it, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we could dive in. I always like to contextualize things. We could also contextualize this here in our present reality, right? You could say the iteration of social wide-scale transformation of society, which really was the 1960s primarily. There were a few things, you go to the 1920s, this and that, but the 1960s in just 3 years changed America, and we're living in that new America now. And up until about 1965, America was like 1954. Leave it to Beaver, very, close communities, very sort of traditional values. And again, people say leave it to Beaver. They criticize that like there's something wrong with that. But really the instrumental thing was primarily the music, and in this instance, the radio itself.
Well, a lot of people, when they think of the 60s, obviously music is a big part of it. The rock scene, technology played a big part of its promotion. Amplified sound, they played a big part in this as well. But you say people don't think of they think of music, but they don't think the power of radio in shaping consciousness and directing society. People think of Hollywood, the movies. Walter Lippmann wrote about the importance of pictures in magazines and then obviously in movies. But people don't think of the medium of radio as being particularly important, because it was a lot of people's minds. It was sort of eclipsed by television. But you argue otherwise in the article, that it's far more immersive and personal, and it made the 60s counterculture, the whole environment of the 1960s possible.
Well, it more so than that, Tim. In fact, I would posit that radio ultimately was a far more transformative architecture, change of America. In fact, I have a part one that's, unfortunately, it's a number of weeks late, but I've been working on part one on AM radio. And as I revisited the material for AM radio, this is the beginning of the whole idea of these collective sort of demographic entities, right? Where you're influencing them. You're inserting agents of influence. You could say you're inserting governance. You had, around the 1917, 1920, you had all these like social clubs, right? Lots and lots of social clubs, say German Americans, German American society. I was going to make a joke. I won't do that. I was going to say Pat Boone is a Zyklon B of rock and roll. That is a bad joke. Oh, figure that one out. Anyways, but literally this is where we got the idea of demographics, and most of the music genres came through the AM radio, including political influence, the psychology of radio, Gordon Allport. It was a totally different medium of understanding human individual and social connectivity, agency, and you could say even going into the family structure. So with a lot of the studies were about FDR, and he had the fireside chat. So essentially, this giant box replaced the father, right? And this was studied in the psychological impact of these, and I won't get all these details, but this tied in. So jazz was literally created by, you know, it was forced that people really didn't like jazz. People protested against jazz. There was a lot of stuff saying that it actually damages the nervous system. And a lot of anti-jazz stuff. And jazz was basically, they play jazz all the time on the radio, all the time. And then you have country music, rock and roll. All these genres literally were products of the radio. And so this was aggregate. I can go further into the social science research, which is the main thing, but I'll leave it there for this moment.
Yeah. Jazz was actually intentionally promoted to supplant classical music, which was the popular music of the early 20th, the first decade of the 20th century. And as you mentioned, radio was a big part of that. It was an attempt to use music to change people's values and ways of looking at the world. And obviously it's much more sexual, and it can be discordant, these things. And it was popular in the Harlem Renaissance, and it was associated loose sexual values. And of course, it's promoted by all the usual suspects as well.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, so that's, and we have to see though that this, in the work that I'm doing, that is certainly there, but it is a much more profound impact. Okay. The profundity of the impact. So let me just, before I jump into that, basically the radio itself was always connected with the military. In 1917, they have negative intelligence that's infiltrating dissent, primarily to get people in the World War I and World War II. Radio was primary. FDR's fireside chats, without that, probably wouldn't have gotten into World War II and World War I. But infiltration, right? So they targeting German Americans, labor activists, pacifists, and radicals during World War I. So negative intelligence was about internal enemies, and they used the audience, they used radio as a influence mechanism, as a way to monitor people, as a way to sort of intersect, right, or interject into because you also had like local radio. I mean, you also had an era where you would have like a radio station that would be like, your neighborhood, what I mean? Or, so there was a little bit of a, or just even, say the German, I don't know how to say German, the Japanese American, I don't know, the whoever, the Slavic society may have their own radio station or radio shows. They'd have events, they'd be broadcast live, the infiltration. But basically, so what, in a sense, it's integration of dissent, but what made radio so important? And this is my money shot. And by the way, I'm trying to get my podcast up and running. The Resonant State, found on YouTube, found on Spotify, on BitChute, on Rumble, One Great Work Radio Network, and I think that's there's one other one, but that's I said BitChute. So, but anyways, so this is well, I don't have to like deep dive into this. Is like sort of the next layer, right? So that's the second layer I mentioned, is the political and espionage and military layer.
Well, you mentioned Franklin Delano Roosevelt's fireside chats, and he probably really wasn't by a fire, was he? But that's how it was marketed, I suppose. You also have Edward R. Murrow's broadcasts from London in the run-up, and also during the Second World War, during the Blitz, and even before, live from London. This is Edward R. Murrow. And of course, if there was, you could say people, radio could be used by the other side. There's someone like the radio priest, Father Coughlin, who they kicked off the radio, showing that radio itself was be permitted if only the right people could be on it. They didn't. Basically he was effectively canceled.
What's interesting is Father Coughlin was one of the influ- big influences on development of a lot of the social science research, network theory stuff that I'll get into, because they're trying to understand Father Conklin's reach, and this there was a couple other things out there like that, but his and I recommend everybody, if you haven't heard of him, but this guy was, he had major impact, right? He was a major social force. He
Hmm.
wasn't just a guy running a podcast, sitting in Starbucks. He had a national movement, right? And he was very popular. And so it was a way of understanding this. How is this possible? Why does this happen and not that? I mean, so all kinds of different studies of networks of influence, just because of the fact that there is a potential neutrality to all these mediums. It doesn't mean that the medium itself, like we're broadcasting on, there are interesting times, by the way, Tim, great show, man. I've been following your show for forever.
Thank you.
And yeah, you've always have great guests and stuff and topics. And it's one of the better podcasts out there but that being said, the, so we're using a similar distribution network and technological
Hmm.
apparatus, right, to record your show. But of course, we don't have the reach. And then going back until not that long ago, the major networks pretty much had a total monopoly of 95% of all media.
Yeah, that was the internet broke it up about maybe it was like 20 years ago when podcast started.
It was it's been a process, right? So when the television, you can just look at the chart. I'm sure there's a graph out there that
Hmm.
some some intrepid academic with a great deal of alacrity has has done, of just showing the fact that you could look at the popularity of internet versus network television anchors, right? And I'm sure it's straight dive, right? And now
Hmm.
actually the internet is more popular than network television, but that went over time, right? In 2001, I mean, still you of course you have cable networks and stuff like that, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
but anyways, so Father Condon again was one of, there's um a lot of major projects. This is based on human group dynamics, generating understanding, management, governance, adaption, transformation of various layers of collectives of people, right? So whether it's a family structure, if 5 people, 10 people, agents. So this is where the whole model of psychology change was through AM radio. Um, so one of the things was that um, it was basically, it was considered, this is the epitome of democracy and national unity, right? And so here's the thing, you create this entire shared, you could say, a virtual space, right? Everybody, the guy in Kansas in the middle of the wilderness or whatever, and then the New York City executive can listen to the same radio show, right? And
Hmm.
so it's taking away geographic distance and space. So it creates this sort of shared public space, but yet there's a book, Benedict Anderson, who is probably still alive, but he's the academic. He talks about imagined communities, right? With newspapers starting to form these imagined communities. So these are collective, you could say, social or spaces, but they're created through virtual, like I'm part of this, or they also make people feel like they're part of something, like I'm part of what's going on, but it's, so that was very important, right? So this creating this new public sphere. So suddenly but it's not necessarily direct with face-to-face contact, right? Um, and so, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt really used to create this feeling of authority, right? He became the voice of authority. The media was now inside the home, right? The media was inside the home. The media became part. You don't just go to a theater, right? It's one thing now, obviously, you're going to play piano, pick up a guitar, sing or something. But I'm talking about there's a broadcast media in the home. And where it is, you can see now, I mean, it's gotten to the point, some people go to their house, they got like a TV in every room. You can't even use
Yeah.
the bathroom
Well,
without.
that's interesting. Remember the old TV show, The Waltons?
Yes, I used to stay, I've stayed down there quite a bit. I've been on the Walton's farm many times.
Well, the beginning, the original beginning, the famous theme music, but the father is pulling up, presents the family, John Boy riding, looking at the window. Here's the horn of his father's truck, and the family comes out. The grandfather emerges from the barn. The kids are playing. The wife comes out. Grandma comes out, and what does he have? A radio. And it starts. They pull the radio up. It's not plugged in yet, and the little girl in John Boy's arms turns it on as a joke, and the whole family now is a radio. That's the beginning of the Waltons.
So the whole family everyone in the family has a radio.
Well, no,
Wow.
it's one of those old radio. It's old style radios. It's for the family. Like a TV.
I got you. Yeah, yeah.
He pulls. He's went out and purchased. This is during the Depression, of course. So people aren't used to creature comforts or luxuries, and radio's a luxury. But the show, begins. It's a struggling family at the Waltons, but they're not destitute. They have land. They're cash poor, I guess you could say. A lot of people were in the Depression, but they had land, so they could make it. But he comes in from the city and with a radio, and now they have a radio. Now they're wired in, if you will. So there you go.
Absolutely. And this is profound because, you know, without, getting into lots and lots of details, I mean, this changed the fabric of American life and the whole sense of community, and the fact that you're interjecting your, you're adding a completely new dimension, right, to basic human experience, interaction with the environment. The technology has assumed, almost, it's like manifested as like a member of the family.
Mhm.
It's become, but it's also creating this space of, so we can look at group conformity, right? This is going all these wonderful experiments like Milgram's experiments, and all this other thing. I mean, and believe me, see, America was, you could say there was some, pretty tough, good pioneer stock in America. It's taken a while to totally break down America, to turn them into a bunch of sniveling trannies, that are just ready to go. You know, that have you bought a Trumpy bear? So there's a Trump, it's a $75 teddy bear. There's a music video, the Trumpy bear. He literally sells, we did this, I put this on a show, but the Trumpy bear, people buy these things, and there's a guy, he's like driving a Harley. It's like, I'm a Marine, I'm a vet, but when I go out on my hog, Trumpy bear's right in front. He's got this like teddy bear. And then it says Trumpy bear. He has this, just open the secret zipper and you have your own American flag blanket. So you open the back, like the butt of the Trumpy bear, and there's a flag, like little blanket that comes out. Anyways, but that Trumpy bear is the suspension of the social order for externally imposed relational hierarchical systems, and also systems of network meaning and valuation. So how you see yourself suddenly, just wearing your clogs, your Dutch clogs to the market. No, you got to buy, the boots Frank Sinatra's wearing, and even though you're walking through mud and you're a hog farmer, I just, but what I'm saying is, like, it changes the dynamic even within, and I want to stress, it changes the dynamic, the infra and intrafamilial familiar dynamics.
Well, you mentioned the development of radio under the auspices or the control of military and, of course, government. And one of the most famous or infamous ones is the Princeton Radio Research Project, which spawned the Halloween Eve's broadcast of War of the Worlds, Orson Welles, which was its own way an experiment on mass psychosis formation, early extension because of the hysteria it allegedly created. Um, can you get into what the Princeton Radio
Yeah. Okay.
project
Yeah.
was?
Yeah. So you know what I mean? I'm trying to like hold out on the money shot.
Hmm.
No, it's good to get that background. No, absolutely. So, and like I said, we went through some of that, more direct military things. But so really, you have really, um, you know, David Sarnoff, right? David Sarnoff was a brigadier general. He was, they called him, and he was the head of RCA for like 70 years. I mean, I don't know how many, like, just an insane amount of time, like, decades and decades and decades. And David Sarnoff was straight out of military intelligence, Office of War Information. And so, um, he was I mean, Sarnoff, when he always gave technology first to the military before they did it, but he was directly a military guy, signals intelligence, Signet, and was basically he was the King Bin Don of NBC, ABC. He was like the godfather of all the networks, right? And RCA Radio Corporation America was direct offshoot of the military just it came directly from the military. But so we get into the deeper aspects, right? And one of those most important aspects, what radio gave was this entirely new way of modeling, and as H.G. Wells said, positive sociology, where you are making changes in society. It is a you're studying, but this is actually it is a kinetic, it is an agent of force, you could say. But basically, so Kurt Lewin, who was really going, Tavistock and the whole cybernetics project, Kurt Lewin was, he developed his theory of psychological topology. And this is a very, very, very important, our modern world really is very much influenced by Kurt Lewin's uh research, and he worked on these micro projects, like getting people in one neighborhood or in like one part of a city to change their basic eating habits. And that's like a major thing to do, right? People are going to eat, but this was a kind of research stuff that he was involved in. um and so the sort of the study, and then of course you've got, the guy flew in on the airplane, Mr. Theodor Adorno, your favorite Marxist, erudite Marxist fanatic, Frankfurt School, with, one of the more intelligent members of this vastly powerful and influential network. His first assignment was to work on radio. So Theodore Adorno was brought to the United States, Columbia University, then going into the what later developed as the Princeton Radio Project. But his actual studying of the media and being part of these projects was why he was technically brought to the United States. And so just, before I get into, say, the world of worlds, which is, very advanced use of this stuff. But Theodor Adorno, people, some have said that he wrote the Beatles lyrics. That's one of those things that am like, okay, I doubt it, but maybe he did. I don't think so. But he was a very important theorist of culture and the impact of music on culture. And he favored, of course, atonal music, right? He wrote and
Hmm.
even composed atonal music. Stockhausen and, Schoenberg,
Hmm.
Transfigured Night. And this is another form of, you could say, this dissolving, solve al collagio, dissolving cultural forms by generating dissonance, by creating antinomian type of artistic, quasi spiritual, expressions, like the Dada movement. And I can keep going. I just giving you time.
No, yeah, it's almost like the audio version of modern art, um, sort of aesthetic terrorism. And the idea was you make music discordant or disturbing. It's not. It's actually upsetting, and it was designed to be upsetting. It was intentionally upsetting. Atonal music. I think Schoenberg. I think he's. I think what his motivation, I think, was because his wife cheated on him or something. He was a convert to Christianity. He was Jewish, and so he decided just to. He was so bitter that he decided to make music, sort of weaponize it. And I think Adorno was brought in to sort of weaponize music too.
Yeah, well Adorno, Adorno, was a Marxist, this wonderful communist ideal that we see in the French Revolution. What a glorious day for humanity, right? The French Revolution.
This was that dawn to be alive, but to be young was heaven. I think someone
Yeah,
once wrote.
yeah. The thing is, you don't. I mean, of course, the French Revolution, absolute barbarity.
Mhm.
Just really, and a very, of course, we all know, like sort of Masonic, and at that time there was an active Illuminati, even though some people have abused that word. Like the Illuminati still exists. Unfortunately, there was a lot of a few people in the 70s and 80s, who were in the sort of conservative Christian, radical Christian community who claimed to be Illuminati members and,
Yeah.
and that were turned out to be spurious. Not that there wasn't a lot of real information. There's a lot of great stuff, I'm talking about that kind of time. Like say you get the video cassette, whatever you have to get get it from your dude who wears
Well,
camo.
it doesn't exist operationally, but I think ideationally, at least the philosophy persists and informs subsequent movements. Good example, I think the founder of the Illuminati, what's his name?
Adam Weishaupt.
Adam Weishaupt. His methods were adopted by Sigmund Freud. so,
Well,
so these things
that
do have an impact. So
that I didn't. To be honest, like that I did not know. But of
yeah,
course, I mean Adam Weishaupt, who was a
the
Jesuit.
interpretation of dreams and all that's based on Adam Weishaupt's.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
So he was a converso, right? He was a converso.
Weishaupt, well, yeah, he was Jesuit. He wasn't a Jesuit. He was Jesuit trained. People always make that. The
Oh,
Jesuit.
yeah, but he was a professor, right?
Yeah,
He had a high level sort of prestigious academic quasi sort of
yeah,
with some kind of religious standing.
yeah. But the idea of creating a perfect society through I guess a secular ideological perfecting man, this idea of perfectibility, this idea you could perfect man through, create a heaven on earth. And of course that obviously was picked up by the communists, right? That, and sort of the Jesuit idea where the Jesuits would examine the conscience of these things. This is done in the milieu or the authority. The Catholic Church is very different. The idea that you would you'd have go some sort of an auditing process, and of course the Scientologists have picked up on this as well. So my point is these methods and ideas, although the organization may not exist, the ideas perdure and they influence subsequent political movements like communism and Marxism, socialism, and even like Scientology. So
Well, yeah, these are all very fascinating. Like Scientology
yeah.
is you brought in so many different types of elements into and some real information, right?
Mhm.
There's, I'll just say this. Not I'm a Scientology supporter. Barriers to learning is really good kinesthetic. It's a way to like if you're having trouble understanding information,
Mhm.
it's a kinesthetic way of seeing absence of mass means you missed the meaning of a word. That's the only thing for Scientology but it is a great technique. It works, right? But the auditing, what is the audit? Well, first of all, Illuminati, these are based on connecting to these, you could say, causal chains of ascension, where you're going through all these different stages and layers of initiation, and there's a sort of very smiley face, shiny peace and goodwill on earth and happiness to all men. As you get in, of course, it's very much based on, um, you have to look at the ones who are controlling these movements and the ones who are participating, at least on lower levels. There's a big gap, right? So people may actually, believe, freedom, liberty, whatever, but the whole idea is this, you know, that the Horror of Red Hook by H.P. Lovecraft, like this, like they bring this like weird demonic spawn from the somewhere near Iraq, this, and then it's like this absolute just devolving and just wearing away and spiritually raping culture, you could say. Really, they
Mhm.
want to kill that. But lots of various initiatory processes, of course, a lot of social connections. But there is this esoteric, the esoteric sort of spiritual power element. Like you said, like the perfectibilist. Well, you know, what do you mean by perfecting man? Like, what do you mean by that? Is that you're trying to gain types of occult and arcane types of powers? Do you want to summon demonic entities? Do you want to do magic workings? Do you want to degenerate society? To me, these are works of evil,
Yeah.
which is fundamentally what all this stuff is. And I think, everyone has to make a decision. So a lot of these types of networks or groups, you're there because, oh, it's going to help my career. It's going to help my business. This may seem a little weird, and you keep going and keep going. But these have tremendous influence and power. But this is, you could say, behind the scenes type of social architecture, engineering, and injecting things in the culture. So the Illuminati, at least as long as it operated, and many other organizations, have a network all over the world, so they can disseminate things, and they have people in very high places, right? So they can even put sort of academic trends or promote certain types of music, and you know what I mean. So they
Mhm.
have that level of, not per se saying that the world is just a giant Illuminati, uh, snake encircling the world or something. But basically, well, look, we live in this world. The first time we did a show was 10 years ago. Look where we're living now. I mean, if anybody can deny the truth of what we're talking about at this point,
Yeah, there's been a great reveal the past 10 years. Yeah.
I mean, like, I no, that's still literally, we did a show like about 10 years ago,
Mhm.
not to this day. And I'll tell you the truth, there's a lot of things at that time, like I didn't want to talk about on air because I was like, I know this, but I don't want to say it because may, you know, whatever blowback. But I mean, things that we envision, I mean, I mean, just not that long ago, right? To think about like all this stuff that just happened, the whole transgender thing, the
Mhm.
George, Black Lives Matter, all these like, very crazed types of social upheaval.
Well, in the article, you talk about the changing images of man. Maybe we're jumping ahead there, but the idea this was in the 1970s. That's out of the Esalen, was it the Esalen Institute that
Um,
produced that?
that's basically Tavistock Institute.
I'm sorry, but the idea is the transformations that they're seeking, you can't get them through legislation or graduate. You need social upheaval, you need crisis to achieve these things. And if you do one thing you do is the great changes in our society, whether economic order, are brought about or facilitated through crises that are supposedly either unavoidable or just something that couldn't be prevented, like world wars or an energy crisis. Um, like I said, the 1970s, the so-called energy crisis, which was pretty much created to disrupt the economy, so you could impose the petrodollar, which was sort of a reset of its day. The closing of the gold window, the final death of the gold standard with the collapse of Bretton Woods. Obviously, World War II changed the economic order because it dethroned the British pound and effectively enthroned the dollar. Of course, that was a 30-year process that started during the First World War. So you have these changes. Well, it's sort of 6 years ago. Right now, we had the summer of George Floyd, which was looking back at it was so bizarre, so fake, But nevertheless, we know the whole trial was a sham, and there's three police officers former police officers languishing in prison, simply because those in power wanted the optics of global riots, uh, and it's what's funny is like these riots seem spontaneous, but they weren't. They had the support of Open Society Foundation, link organizations. You had all types of logistics that were exposed during that summer, but it wasn't organic. It wasn't like you know if the police stand down, certain groups are going to riot because they're going to loot and steal stuff, and then the media can spin a narrative, right? That's what they did in 2020. But a good example happened in Minnesota where the um the the city government actually settled out of court with George Floyd's family before the criminal trial, which is usually that's reversed because they use the criminal trial as the basis for the civil trial. But they settled out of court, paid them $20 million because the city government and the government of Minnesota wanted the riots. And that's what people don't understand. Those in authority wanted the riots. They wanted the disruption. And that's something that most people, I don't think, still quite understand the nature of the people that rule over them and the political class. Why we have all this trouble in the world, because they need the disruption, they need the discord, they need the all the rancor. Otherwise, they won't be able to impose their whatever agendas they have.
Well, this is foundational. The question is, we draw our boundaries. Who is there, this or that, but there are obviously certain architects who, in fact, from their inception, at least in recorded history, have been sponsoring the same type of agendas, which is a complete hegemonic control but not only control, but the flattening, just the destruction of the humanity of those they control, right? So those they control must be reduced to this bestial level, right? Just like you have God and Gollum. Norbert Wiener's seminal work on cybernetics and all of this is, which I was sort of getting towards via Adorno and going up to Lewis Hill, which we haven't got there yet. But the cybernetic modeling of being able to induce massive changes by you could say a polyhedron of methods. Sorry, my wife is watching the show Nero Wolf. He has like this big vocabulary, so I'm trying to talk. When I'm doing the show, she's like, "Oh, I heard you like blah, 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 blah." Like, no, I'm gonna talk like Nero Wolf. So I'm hitting my vocabulary. But you know what? Vocabulary is important. Like why should we talk like we don't know certain words? Like just the intelligence level. You know what I mean? Not as a pretension, but going back to the directionality is that this idea of the inversion of life, which is basically the definition of evil, in the sense that you are creating multiple complex vector points to generate destabilization, demoralization, social and spiritual depravity, sexual promiscuity, selfishness, materialism, but whatever that means, because I happen to like the material world, right? The material world is called what God created. It's called nature. And people that are like, oh, it's a matrix. Reality is a glitch. No, yes, the system you live in is a matrix, right? It's yes, if you live in this, if you're going whatever, vector of the, media, whirlpools, black holes you want to go into, but there's reality, dude. This is called sky, earth, your family, this, that, and this loss of reality is just symptomatic of this idea of generating destabilization factors that ultimately lead to violence, that lead to another form, which is the Trotsky's theory of the permanent revolution. you got your system. Now you have to overthrow that system, destroy everything. And of course, based on this logically maybe slightly suspect thing, if every single thing is stripped away and all morals and all values and all everything is just destroyed, then suddenly the workers' paradise will just come out of the ground. Oh, here it is. It just magically manifests. Hegel. Thank you, Hegel. Right? Pop. There it is. I mean, Marxism. I'm sorry. There's so many fundamental flaws in it, but I mean, this had immense power. Year zero. Pol Pot. Pol
Yeah.
Pot. Cambodia. Pol Pot. You know where his name came from? Him.
No, I know it wasn't his real name. He changed it. But
Well, because he was hanging out in the
in France.
avant, avant-garde literary cafes of Paris, and then they'd say he's got political potential, Pol Pot. So he heard that, and he took it as his name, political potential. That's how he got his name.
Really, that's funny.
It is funny, right? But so I think this. I mean, I think it's very important to get to the details, the facts, the kinetics of these things, but also I think the sort of the higher level architecture, conceptual, and I think ultimately this is spiritual architecture, depending on how you define your life and your lifespan in this earth, how you look at it. But really, you say like George Floyd. I'm going to do this lady. She wrote a book and did this documentary on George Floyd. They destroyed her life. I mean, it was like just crazy, like what happened to her. And so she had has all this research, and of course, what's the mirror image of George Floyd? Right, the kid in England, right, stabbed to death by the Sikh with
Yeah.
his dagger, and this and anyways, it's stunning the level of like what has happened to these things are shock. They should be radically shocking to people, and they're not.
No, well, they get sort of a nerd to it to accept it. It's just the modern world is crazy, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. But so it's there to create despair, and also so that people no longer have any agency. At least to feel that don't have any agency to deal with these things.
Yeah. So anyways, basically, so one of the most important things that developed through the the radio and this stuff was these the work of Kurt Lewin. And Kurt Lewin, so there's a couple things that are very important. The fundamental factor that came about was theories of persuasion and the development of theories of persuasion. And mostly they were focused on the individual mind, right? You have the Mesmer, the guy with the hypnotic chain, that gets you to do whatever. And that's, these are you look at some of the silent films, and you think like this, these are actual movies, man. And they, certainly they showed the future, and this future, of course, is based on propaganda, group and network propaganda, social structures, and using communication flows and generating pressure on individuals associated with groups or networks, depending, I mean, of course, they say peer pressure, right? But I mean, again, what does that mean, right? Peer pressure. Well, why did all the teens like, here's a great example. You probably know this, and it's, gosh, I forget which state. It's, like Arkansas or somewhere, or whatever. But this small town, like elite, I mean, nice, one of the smaller towns with, pretty, high level, high financial, one of those like real nice little kind of gems, right? The high school, they had massive cases of venereal disease,
Oh yeah,
syphilis.
I've heard. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. and Tupac, right? It was from Tupac, and they created. They were having group sex. They were doing. I mean, it was massive, and it was all because of the influence of rap and primarily Tupac. And a lot of these girls got venereal disease, and some of them became infertile at like age 15. They slept whatever, and Tupac. His response was, I won't give the expletives, like that sure as those white bat bleep bleep hoes right, that's what they deserve, those white da, da, da. It's just a song. Why you do what I'm saying in the song, you white blah blah blah. And these, I mean, it was just devastated community just in a small area. That's the power of groups and networks. Okay, look at that. I mean, and that's it. Years ago when I was started doing this stuff, there's a study about that particular incident, and it is really, really shocking, man. I mean, we're talking like, mind blowing. And the thing is, there's certain types of activities you get into, it's very hard to come back from them. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to take you a long time to get out of that, and you may never do it. I mean, anyways, so basically, what we have, the idea of influencing individuals, advertising. So now we're having individual and groups and networks creating webs of listeners. So families in living rooms, co-workers discussing programs, right? So you see the media interjects into the social space, the relational space, right? Interpreting messages together. And so these messages fused together. It's, it's the influence on the, various types of, social interrelationship, like I just mentioned, can be very subtle. It can be very powerful, profound. I mean, I remember like when I was high school, all these, kids, they would act out lines from TV shows like this, like this, and I always got called like, hey, Han Solo. Hey, Han Solo, like,
Well,
then,
I think we don't have them anymore. Remember, just as recently as, I guess, 20 years ago, you still had water cooler shows, right? Network television. 90s, it was Seinfeld, right? And now you don't have that anymore. Now with streaming, you don't have that anymore. People watch a show at a certain time so they can talk about it. There was must-see television. I think it was Thursday night on NBC when their most popular shows ran. It would get people prepped for the weekend, I suppose. But it was, you don't get that. Nor do you have the sort of the monoculture where you have references to commercials, where you could refer to a commercial, you could spoof commercials, and everyone know what you were talking about. I remember there was a show, the movie Airplane, came out in 1980, spoof of these 70s shows like Airport, and they do a lot of spoofing or references to popular commercials in the movie that are funny, and you present it to people now, kids watching, they won't get half the humor. And I guess all comedy has an expiration date on it, I suppose, but people no longer have commercials to refer to anymore. They've smashed the monoculture.
Well, this is, just think about this, there's parasocial relationships, and then that, like sports, right? I mean, if, and maybe if I offend you, you're a sports fan, but I mean, it's like people just so into sports, like, okay, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. I really
matter.
don't, man. I mean, but it's almost like, like I have to be castrated because I don't know. And I'll just say, oh yeah, like I don't like, but it is so powerful in relationships between males, right? I mean, just think about that. If sports, but I also remember that even, when I, back in the day, I was, corporate I only had a brief foray into the corporate world. I've been ejected by society, but I'm still rolling. That's all right. But I mean, the water cooler shows, that's how you talk to people. This, you're saying, oh, did you see, what, Joe said on Friends last night? Ha.
Yes. Yeah, sports. I agree with you. I mean, obviously, when I was a kid, I loved, baseball, but I was a kid, and that's appropriate. And, even early adulthood, youth, I followed it, but it slowly became marginal in my life as I took on responsibilities and other things to worry about. I knew there's much more important things going on in the world, and it's just a huge time suck. It's designed to be a time suck. That isn't to say that I don't, a lot of it, because the sports teams you watch are a reflection of where your family comes from, which is sort of, I think, so they sort of exploit a healthy impulse, which is local patriotism. That's why you have teams named after cities, But professional sports with money has pretty much ruined it, as far as it's all corrupt now, and half of it's probably fixed and rigged anyway. So,
Well,
but
no,
people,
this,
but listen, if you say that, you'll offend you'll offend more people if you say the NFL is rigged than if you deny the divinity of Jesus Christ or the Holy Trinity.
yeah, I know exactly.
Yeah.
And if you deny the barbecue, the big barbecue, the 6 million barbecue, that
Oh,
that has created the subtext of the suicide pact with depravity, right?
yep, yep.
Like, oh, you know what? I'm a, I'm an evil, you know, because that Germanic culture of discipline, of fathers respecting their sons, of not being, having a marriage and respecting the marriage vows like they
Hmm.
mean something, like it's serious, you know, um, that that is, this become badges of shame because this is evil. This is, of course, the authoritarian personality, right? That's
Yeah,
also, and this actually comes out of where we started. We will go into the work of the authoritarian personality. It's a direct, it is a, I mean, I don't like to say a direct causal chain, but it is a scientific application of what I've been talking about. Okay, so well, let me just that was actually it's nice talking to someone that I don't feel like, you know,
no,
like
it's a manual for moral subversion.
yeah, well, no, what I would say
That's what
about
it is. Yeah,
sports, right? You care about like my niece is playing a game. I'm gonna go see it. I'm like this. I'm from this town, but your connection with the town when we started out, 1917, you have these community organizations, right?
yeah,
That were very, and many community organizations, and these were real things, right? This is what was initially say infiltrated, but as I mentioned, negative intelligence, part of that was infiltrating community organizations of suspect communities, so to speak. Um, but then again, it's not that okay. Look, it's I'm not like I hate sports, but I mean, what a waste of time. Okay, you do with your family, you go to the game, it's your hometown, fine. But if people like when I used to have television, I have all the free, Amazon, like, no, I'm paying for it. No, Netflix, no, you got to watch this garbage show and you got to watch like 10 minutes of ads. Like, it's just like, dude, I mean, it
yeah.
just sucks and you're paying for it. It's like, okay, just go ahead and give me another one. Thank you, sir. May I have another one? Thank you. Just keep taking because your media is so great. But that, it's like, go Gita board is as a Marxist, a leftist, he was part of the 1968 Paris
Hmm.
Rebellion, but his Society of the Spectacle,
Yeah.
and which was a Baudrillard, really, he okay, you have McLuhan, you have you know Gita board, who in a sense is more powerful. They sort of, and then you have Baudrillard, who really is just in a certain degree, he's just a rehash of the board, but Society of the Spectacle, all reality has moved into this spectacular space. So in a sense, you go to the office and when you went to bed last night, you saw, you're watching Cheers. Hey, friends, come here. Oh, Dave, what's Bobby doing? Oh, wow. And then there's a water cooler at work. Oh, I'm at work at my water cooler. subconscious mind. Oh, I'm going to talk about the TV show, talk about this dreamscape, this non-existent dream reality you're inhabiting. So that's another, meta layer of all these things, right? It's you can control someone, but how do you make them change their values? How do you make them hate their own values? How do you make them think that, I mean, how much art and stuff has been on the excuse, you know, European people have perpetuated the greatest evil in all history of all cosmoses, and we are doomed to sin. And we are just, and the more we destroy like architecture, art, family structures, the more we destroy that, the more we're good people.
Yeah, you get people to basically to kill themselves culturally because they've been denied an identity or been denied a history or they've been fed a narrative history which condemns them as judges them as guilty, you know, somehow uniquely evil while they pretty much whitewash, the manifest crimes and barbarity of the non-Western world, but you can't impose those standards on the non-Western world because they're not Western. Well, then you really can't judge the Western world either, I suppose, if that's if everything's relative, they'll condemn the conquistadors, but they won't say anything about the Aztecs,
Yeah, no, exactly. So anyways, these are continuing to the research. So in terms of understanding the sort of the importance thing of radio, and by the way, so if you look at the early studies on perception of event linkage, reaction time, the auditory sense is much faster than the visual sense, much faster. So auditory sense is actually much more prominent in localization in the environment, while the visual sense, of course, is the most you can say the most prevalence or whatever, but anyways, so the Friges Cathane, right, published
well,
short story.
we talk about the audio. It's a good example is that you're right, because if you just look at it, if how hearing an old song will take you back to your childhood, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think there's a visual will do that. You see a movie. I watched this movie when I was a kid. I remember that. That's not the same, but a song will take me back to my child. A good example is the one song that always takes me back is something to it. Just what, it's Seals and Cross, Summer Breeze. That
Summer breeze
makes me feel
fine.
It came out 1972, I think, but it takes me back. It takes me back to the mid 70s when I was a little kid, and every time I hear that, it just takes me back. Some songs do that, and songs have a power. Smells do that too, from what I understand. Like an old smell that takes you back. You smell an old house, but the audio, the sound will take, which is why songs can be so. People are very sentimental about songs because it takes them back. Their first song makes them think of a deceased spouse, that sort of thing. So yeah, it has that power. I'm sorry, I interrupted your thought there. Maybe so.
No. I mean, music is, there's certain things like I will talk about, but I think unless you recognize that, if you still believe in the theory of evolution. And you're like, either you understand that you live in creation, period. You don't need, millions of theories about, oh, we found the cosmic black hole, double, triple quarks. And now we're gonna spend like $300 trillion to like bang some tiny little particles together and make some like computer simulations, or maybe
Yeah.
or maybe open up astral demonic portholes. I don't know.
Well, did they celebrate that when they did that in Europe? That weird particle collider, whatever they did 10 years ago.
they had that ritual thing, which was,
Yes.
yeah, and that was it was not actually at the collider, it was on the train tracks, but it's still,
Yeah.
it's the train tracks that go there, but that was a straight up occult working. This goes back, you
I
can
thought, I
look
thought
at,
these were scientists.
well, yeah, you know, you can go back. Here's the thing, is that um, you know, alchemy, certain types of spiritual practices, certain types of, you know, at this point, like I'm academic or not, I'll say, look, either you recognize the world you live in or you don't, but you have to fundamentally make some moral choice in your heart, in your life, based upon the world we're living in, unless you just want to be, you know, whatever, you know, little hell level you can just travel into, like the drug abuse now in the United States. It's it's obscene. I mean, it is really or just worldwide, but I mean these drugs are like, it's not like, oh, I'm gonna do a bump. I'm gonna go, I'll have a couple shots of cognac and do a bump and dance, some disco. At least they had real drummers who could play in time. I'm sorry. Yeah, this I actually like there's some very good studio cats on some of those disco tracks, Le Freak, say she. But I mean, that's all like Steve Gadd. They had two drummers, did almost all that stuff. Perfect time. Perfect time. Like amazing. All your drum. Okay, anyways. Um, but like, okay, yes, you can this or that. You're talking about drugs, you do it one time, like super high concentration dosage, like THC things. It's not like you're taking a puff on a joint. No, it's like you've taken something that like, that only like Scarface could get back in the 80s, and now you
Mhm.
just buy it on your street corner, in your store. And but I mean, you may not have seen this, but I've seen people just whacked out, like zombified, man, like Philadelphia style. Even in this, this great metropolis of ultimate mediocrity, Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah. The home of Les Wexner.
Yeah, so that was a weird. It's not weird. I just want to say, like, we look at the research, and I think you have to draw it to your life, your positioning, and your choices you make. And I think all of us have to make very important choices now. And this is not dependent upon environmental concerns per se, but we need to know the enemy, at least from the position I'm speaking from, so to speak. So, anyways, so we have 1929, we have the development of the 6 degrees of separation. So this is the idea of an interlinked web with social units of influence. Okay, influencers, right? But also, um, the 6 degrees of separation,
Hmm.
people are connected by no more than six acquaintances. Is there any scientific basis for that?
Uh,
Probably not.
Probably not. No.
Okay. But anyways, so chain links, and then so really the two most important things, the early radio stuff is Kurt Lewin. And Kurt Lewin, everybody's worried about the AI. Well, these guys were doing AI in like 1930, man, or trying to, career eye for the AI.
Yeah.
We're gonna have this golem, right? This is the Adam Kadam, the realized man. We've reached the 10th Sephirah, and now we will now bring about the ultimate man, who's like what, this hybrid, like let's turn our brains into a computer. Yeah, sure, Elon, just go ahead and just inject some like weird digital stuff and things into my temples, and let my
Neuralink.
brain
Yeah.
be connected into the internet all the time.
Well, that's that crude materialism where it's the brain, the mind isn't really material. The brain is, but the mind is what's consciousness, right? And of course, there's the issue of the soul, which they evidently don't believe in, which is probably their blind spot in all this. So,
Yeah. And so and not to get too, but I think, certain things like moral law. Well, I mean, I think we all know I mean, there's a basic understanding of what is moral and what is not. I think
Mhm.
this is so many people said, oh, there's no morality is just completely socially conditioned. I don't think so. I don't think that's evidenced by what you see around you. And you know, but this whole idea, like, I mean, there's right and wrong if you don't grasp that. But of course, this is the whole point. And then we go to Kurt Lewin, and this is really one of the very powerful figures of this whole thing. Um, so creating mathematically quantizable modeling of social units using aggregate analytical research data, right? So we talk about the authoritarian personality. This is based on surveys and statistics, right? And
Mhm.
statistical analysis going into field theory, which means also you can model, um, you can create sort of um, aggregate optimal vector insertion points. What I mean that is aggregate. So say let's take a certain grouping of people. There's an aggregate. We have a grouping, and we're going to find what are a couple of the things we can just push into this. Who are some of the people we can insert into this environment that will be able to have influence by influencing so and so, right? So they're doing this stuff on as I mentioned, one of Lewin's things is changing people's dining habits, breakfast meal habits, like in Texas, and like saying how to do it, and again, these are things that they have some sort of deep social connection. Anyways, so the idea of the social field, so it's field theory, individual behavior, it's a function of the individual and the environment. So we have individual in the environment. So the environment, we forget, we don't just live on our cell phones, right? It's the world's not just a cell phone. Is it? No, of course not. But and I just keep seeing these videos. Oh, breakthrough, matrix reality glitch. Nothing is real. Okay. Then you can, chat GPT psychosis. This is all leading up to that, right? Chat GPT psychosis is Kurt Lewin's field theory, individual and the environment. And formula is B equals F parentheses P comma E. So field theory, this is again, well, different topic, but anyways, so the social field, and then we go his very, very, very important model. Do you know that his Lewin's model, freeze, unfreeze, refreeze. So, so, so this model, unfreeze, change, refreeze, right? Unfreeze means what? Existing habits and norms have to be destabilized. This is the unfreeze, right? So you pull apart existing norms. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, um, and then once you've unfrozen, so we can look at, going back to radio. So the drive-in theater, songs about sex
Mhm.
and having sex in the car, in the
Mhm.
drive-in movie theater, listening to Chuck Berry or whatever.
Yep. My
So
ding-a-ling-a-ling. Yeah.
my daily Chuck Berry was a really depraved sexual degenerate. Did you know that?
I'm shocked.
Sorry to burst your bubble, Tim. I'm so sorry,
Ah,
man.
he was my role model.
Chuck was the only one left. I could only still believe in. He was like, no.
So basically, deconstructing 2 millennia of Christian culture that developed over 2,000 years. That's what's happening.
Well, then these are it's very important to grasp that, you know, I'm talking about this
I
material
mean,
data
I don't know, Kurt
as,
Lewin, Paul Lazarsfield, Adorno. Do you see a pattern here?
yeah, no, but no, I don't, Tim. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
I can't. We're not allowed to do that. Okay.
No, there's no patterns. There's no, it's nothing. I'm not. No, 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 no. No.
Let's
So,
destroy values, morality, so we all could be free. Because everyone knows, because it's every man will have the resources to impose his own morality. We all know that's not true. It's the few billionaires who can impose their rules, right? Because really, morality is the great equalizer, right? It's basically if you idea of objective morality applied broadly across society, no matter who you are, you have the capacity to say, no, you can't do that because it's wrong. But if you impose subjectivism or moral subjectivism or moral relativism, only the few with the resources can impose their values on everybody. See how that works? So, they in the rhetoric of liberating everybody, they enslave everybody to a few oligarchs who actually have the resources to impose their will or their narrative or their sense of reality on society because they've shattered all objective truth and morality. It's a trick.
well, absolutely. And,
Yeah.
and I, for myself, whatever circumstances my own life trajectory has, but you know what? If you're honest, if you're moral, if you try to do the best you can and and do good work and respect, like saying, I love my wife and, you know, that's it. I'm married, period. I don't even need to entertain anything outside of that. And just small, I mean, just small things, but like, just it's much easier to live that way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's much easier to live in a way where, okay, maybe everything you don't understand, maybe things are happening, and, of course, we're in a very, vast, infinite universe, but, it's much easier to streamline your life and say, okay, I have the situation. Um, I mean, I had a guy threaten my life before I played a sitar concert in front of 1,000 people, man. And I have to admit, I was pretty angry, but you know what? Let it go. I did my show and I can make a choice. We have freedom of will. We have freedom of agency. We have freedom of attention. We have freedom of attention, which means what we pay attention to. We have freedom. Okay, what are you doing with it? Anyways, so for Lewin, unfreeze, break down the habits and norms, then introduce new practices. So this is our process, right? We break the ice, right? We we let the ice sort of turn into water. And this is basically the ice cube model for society. And then once you've introduced the new practices, you refreeze. You fix them in a stable equilibrium of cultural change. And, I'm sure you can think of things that were unthinkable 50 years ago, 75 years ago, are now just completely normal. And you don't even have to put a second glance at it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, right, transgender theory. I mean, job application. They have a wellness app, masturbation. They have a guided morning. It actually pays $2,000 a month. It's a 6-month study, and so they, um, and basically they have a guided wellness masturbation. Or, you get up in the morning and you turn on your app, the wellness app, and it's a guided masturbation session.
Okay,
And then,
that's well, it's Rolling Stone magazine, I think a few years ago, that said that there was the movement that convinced young men to forswear pornography and stop masturbating, and Rolling Stone said that was anti-Semitic. And that, of course, if you know about the authoritarian personality,
Mm.
you understand why they say that. Because if men stop doing that, take stock in their lives, start doing something productive, and develop relationships with a woman and have a family, they, based on the F scale, well, the authoritarian personality, they do become fascist based on their perverse methodology, right? So it's all very ethnocentric. I mean, it's not scientific; it's ethnocentric because it's ethnic warfare, waged under the guise of social science. Surprise, surprise, right?
Well, I think, at least for me, it's impossible to understand this in purely material terms without saying there has to be some spiritual impetus to put this much effort and just fucking everything up in the world and making it just
Well,
crappy.
Michael Jones would say it's the rejection of logos. It began at the foot of the cross when he rejected Christ, and that revolutionary spirit has reverberated throughout history. It never ends, and it ebbs. It basically waxes and wanes, ebbs and flows throughout history, depending on the circumstances. And since the Enlightenment and sort of Jewish emancipation and the development of liberalism in the West and Freemasonry, which actually created an avenue for infiltration and eventually ascendancy and dominance of the West, which we see today, which is just in full bloom now. That's depending on social and political conditions, it waxes and wanes. But that's where you get we see there's a spiritual component to it,
Absolutely.
And the rejection of logos is because basically you're rejecting all reason, all right. That's why they're revolutionary and they're subversive. And it manifests or it's expressed in everything, and Freudianism, psychoanalysis, modern art, pornography, promoting sexual degeneracy, these things. So.
Well, no, that's the amount of effort spent to make other people unhappy.
It is amazing.
Really,
it is, yeah.
But like unhappy in a way, like tragically unhappy. Like what I mean, small tragedies. Like you just go, like a woman, girl, she learns that no, I have to it's cool, or I just I have to sleep with men. This is and then loses the opportunity to have a beautiful family. Guys that get into you know like the pickup artists, right? NLP pickup artists. What you guys, I mean, you can pick up and then you can program any woman. Oh, you have sex, and this is Neil Strauss, right? I have the book, I got the leather bound copy. The pickup artist, he did this, he did this thing, undercover thing with a pickup inside the secret societies of pickup artists. And I got this, I got a 2-box CD. These were given to me by a friend, unfortunately, who's he died and he left me this stuff. But there's it was like a $350 CD set of how to pick up women. And it was NLP people would go to these seminars, and this is probably 2000-ish, whatever. But I'm saying okay, I remember listening to the first one and saying, Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow. And so that was about as far as I got. But there's 20 CDs of guys just learning all these hypnosis techniques to sleep with women. And what you have sex with women. Yeah. What I mean, it's things happen in life. Okay, look, if you're married and you fall in love with the love of your life and it's this thing, okay, maybe there's something there but it's going to tear apart whatever. But to promote the idea that you are unfaithful or that women just sleep around, you just don't make that decision, because if as soon as you lose that connection, we didn't make the womb. I mean, this is the sky and the earth, and and if you respect the laws of God, God's laws will respect you.
Yeah.
Eventually. It may take time. You may have to suffer, but not all suffering is bad. anyways, so yeah, the Kurt Lewin, I know we're wrapping up here. So, but Kurt Lewin is go ahead, Tim. That was a rant. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, the idea that it's pure evil. The idea that it's not simply making money off people's suffering or their gullibility. It's also the pleasure they get out of doing it. If you think of Hollywood or people that produce music and entertainment that are there to corrupt or to misguide the youth, and that's just a business model. And there's no thought to what they're doing to whole generations of children or young people. Do they take? You think they take some responsibility, given if you're involved in media or music, you want to uplift and edify people, but no, it's extractive almost. And even with popular music, the decline of popular music since the 1980s, I'd say probably since the 70s or early 70s, largely because music producers realized that it's a lot easier to manage artists with no talent than actually manage real talented people. And they could produce this stuff. And there's also technology and stuff like that with, electronic drum machines and the idea of how it's broadcasted. Basically something goes viral. It's quick, and there's no really artistry is lost in that. The end of album rock and all that stuff, or art that would come with that. The idea of you're feeling something physical media, all of this a completely different interaction with music than it is when you just have an MP3 device. And they've even done studies where the pleasure you'd get when you listen to radio, FM radio, and a song would come on that you hardly ever hear, but you love it. And it would be an exhilarating feeling when you hear it. And now, because of it's not scarce, you can listen to a song anytime you want, you lose that feeling. Right? It's almost, I guess you could say it's equivalent to maybe having a sexual experience where, if you have it, if you're like a pickup artist, it numbs the senses. If you always have, if you have, end up like what's his name? Who's the basketball player from the '60s who apparently slept with 10,000 women?
Oh yeah. I don't want to say the wrong name, dude. I don't want to get sued. They're going to sue me.
He was in the Conan the Barbarian movie. What was it? Chamberlain.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Wilt Chamberlain. And it's like, it's great. That's another thing what they're doing is they're promoting the black athlete as a sexual, this Lothario, this dominant sexual being at the same time. It's like, really, this is the function of sports to promote this. It's like, but it's yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm going off on a tangent there, but radio, yeah, the idea of is the frequency that you can now listen to music is so convenient that today's generation don't get the pleasure of listening to radio and waiting for the random song to come on,
or just buying the vinyl, etc. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. But it's and I don't want to but this to me, it's like, so somehow you're here, you're alive. You're a living being. Okay. In my case, I'm a man, right? And I won't see, I had my academic career basically crushed by political correctness.
Mhm.
And, I was like, they wanted just to blow me up. Like, we're going to put an atomic bomb, just like blow, just gone, right? I wasn't even aware of these things, but they were very powerful. They were invisible to me because I just, I didn't put that much attention into it. But this is what Guy Debord says. They take away the pleasure of ordinary life. Right? Martin Heidegger talks about the average, ordinary everydayness, the concrete reality, and the space of the family around the dinner table without the TV on, or around the water cooler without talking about, Bobby gave Billy a blowjob on Friends or something, like all these things, promoting these like artificial cultures and also promoting relational groups. Do you understand? Friend circles. So these are modular modelings, right? So even look at it as a family structure, the unfreeze, you can operate, say, on Billy. Just random, but whenever I grew up, there were all these finds of pornography, like in the woods or wherever.
Yes.
Yeah, dude,
That's where I was exposed to it. Yes.
dude. I'm sorry.
There was someone said, "Hey, go back to the woods." Yeah.
I brought this up, again back when. Sorry, I've been drinking this blue tea, man. Blue tea. It's really good. Anyways, blue butterfly pea tree tea. It's a smart drug. It's like this, it's super healthy. It's just from a flower, but unfortunately, I got a little piece of that in my mouth, in my throat. So, but these pornography dumps, no,
yeah,
I got to tell you, I got dozens of people contacting me with stories about this all over the country. And I remember it started like sixth grade. This guy around. He's like, "Have you seen Cutie Nudie playing card game?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "What?" Guess the kid that took us all to ride our bikes out there on the bike trail. Guess what he was? If I could say, ding 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 ding. But
every single time.
No. I'm saying that this is a memory I never, I just thought right now I remember he brought us out there because, we used to ride our BMX bike and there's just this huge mound and it's like a, it's a panopticon of pornography. I mean, it's in like under a tarp, thrown off in the leaves by the side of these bike trails. And there's Penthouse, Hustler, Playboy, everything.
Mm-hmm. And it would get around that it was available. And of course, all the boys would go see it. Yeah. And of course, theoretically, you can only look at it if you're an adult, right?
Well, this was illegal, but this, for me, this happened like elementary school, like sixth grade, seventh grade.
Yeah, it was because you always knew someone who knew someone and they'd tell you about it. So to me, I think I was like maybe 9 when I first ran into it. You knew someone, and it's a form of molestation when that occurs. That shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen to me. I just had a healthier upbringing, so I had countervailing influences that I'd be dishonest to say it didn't have an effect on me. Of course it did. But there was always something else. There was a tap on my shoulder. I was afforded the sacraments of the Catholic Church and the grace it provided. Mm-hmm. So these are protections you get in life. These are countervailing influences that you have that hopefully pull you back because in life you got to run into these things. You don't necessarily have to have that because that necessarily didn't have to be tolerated.
Yeah, no, that's that's very important what you just said. But this is really because over, whenever I, started doing here and there, my broadcast stuff as a bit embittered academic, I'm like, okay, F it. I'll just because I was like, I'm not, and so I had no background. I just used my research model I used on any classical music, applied it to American music, and I just kept going and going and going. But this pornography dump thing, I had like some lady called me from Florida and she described there were these dumpsters in grocery stores and they had brand new bundles of magazines.
Interesting. Yeah.
They were put in the dumpsters and you slide open the little metal door and you could just bring out you just like bundled, whatever twine bundled things. And I've had so many people talk about this and it's, think about that. So if you don't mind, where you live or where did you grow up at, which state?
Oh, this would have been Washington, D.C. when I was, and also Northern Virginia area.
Okay. You're with the elite class.
Yeah.
The Yeah. But, I mean, I've gotten stories of this from at least, I think at one point I was like 50 plus, like I said. But anyways, this is exactly what I am talking about. So this is not a tangent. This is an example. We talk about radio. This is a modeling. This is a deployment of this particular, you know, method of warfare, I would say. Because again, what I mean, why do you want to hurt other people, man? Just do good things, make society moral. There's always going to be people that are crazy, but don't promote that behavior,
Mhm.
right? Don't make that an ideal. Don't, you know, create disharmony and take people out of the potentiality of having some type of, unless you have some type of sanctity or understanding that it's there. We're all flawed, we all do different things, but at least you got something that will hold you together. Otherwise, especially where we're at right now, okay, it's, you're not going to go there. But anyway, so this is what I mentioned, Kurt Lewin's action research. This is the pornography drop. I guarantee you it's basically a textbook Kurt Lewin action research study project. I swear to God,
Mhm.
literally that's what it is. But anyways,
Well, I
action,
mean, Germany after World War II was inundated with pornography. When they did the currency reforms to coincide with the economic recovery, they flooded the country with pornography. The same thing occurred in Portugal in the 1970s to destabilize the Salazar regime. We more recently, pornography was distributed in Iraq, in Iran, and also in Palestine, in Ramallah, when the Israelis occupied Ramallah, they took over the TV station and started broadcasting pornography 24/7. At the same time as imposing a curfew on people. So it's a weapon. So it's not too crazy to think that some of these dumps could be just dumped there just so it could proliferate and let kids see it.
well, it's
I mean, and now it's all over the internet and people's cell phones. So I don't know.
well, no, I mean,
It's not spontaneous. People have to create it and put it up there and distribute it. I mean, so now it's all on people's cell phones, and we have 8-year-old kids with cell phones looking at it. I think the average age for exposure to pornography is like 8 in this country.
see, this is, I mean,
I mean,
there's things that have impacts in certain ways, right? So reading Lady Chatterley's Lover or Henry Miller's Tropic of Capricorn, Tropic of Cancer, whatever, of course, how will have a devastating effect on your brain
mhm.
because it's just such a retarded, just like but I mean, this is spastic, non-talented artist promoted as like the greatest poet of the past 20,000 years, Allen
Mhm.
Ginsberg.
Yeah.
Someone gave me a gift of his book. It's called White Stains. I didn't open it. I just realized I got to clear my bookshelf.
Yeah. But this is the guy. You get a party in Manhattan. He'd like go to the party stark naked. Oh, thanks, Alan.
And he was not, it's not like, it's like, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, no, it's like this dude's not, you don't want to see that guy, man. It's like,
oh, what a radical. You're just a pervert, buddy.
you just, but he's also like, look, I'll say this, and this may seem like I'm absolutely against what I've been saying, but okay, you know what? You know, there is a little bit, okay, maybe, you're 22 and then okay, you may have some experience here and there. That may not be that bad. It's like, okay, there's a little flash of something, right? Okay, but then you say, you know what? That's not my focus in my life. I'll go somewhere else. what you have is the industrialization. I mean, one thing, I mean, it really hit me so much. This, uh, it, I really, I hate to talk about it. This gangbang thing with these pornography. It just came. I had a dream about it. Like the dream was that basically there was the dream was that there's some, girl or lady, and I'm trying to produce her video, and then ends up there trying to take her into this sort of lifestyle pornography. And it was just so it was like whoa, that looks really bad. And then I just did started doing research, and I think I forget, she did like 1,000 men or something like that, like literally 1,000 men. Like this is a true, I mean, it's horrific. I mean, I'm sorry to say it, it's absolutely horrific. I mean, pornography it is something that will have, it's not that, you think like, oh, you're so conservative, but no, this is damaging. This is, there is no beauty here. This is this is made through the actions of evil, and this will only generate that, or else remove your actual heart from your
Hmm.
relationships, so you can't feel, you can't feel that love anymore. Because look, you're a pickup artist. Would you sleep with 10,000 women? I mean, who cares, right? Like, what are you aggregating? What is your accomplishment? I mean, but look, people prior to this in the past, we can look at, all these depraved people throughout the millennia, but you don't celebrate that. You don't put that on a pedestal like this is, wow, what an accomplishment.
No, because what value are you adding to society, really, when you do that? It's just pure egotism, narcissism, and you're essentially a social vampire at that point, and the whole point of one thing that make distinct one of the things that distinguishes a man from the beast is the ability to create a society, and that requires cooperation, and that requires serving each other in the truest sense of the word, right? Sacrificing for each other. We all kind of understand that for the most part, just that these people can operate on the margins and sort of have a parasitical existence. But the problem is, if you promote if you promote sexual revolution to disrupt the social political order, which really what began in the French Revolution with the Marquis de Sade, and it's been picked up by other figures since then. But the idea is, if that behavior becomes normative or widespread, society collapses. Because again, you can only have a few people acting that way without doing considerable damage to the social fabric or social order, even to the economy, because ultimately just the physical infrastructure you can't maintain anymore because you've destroyed the human capital, which makes the physical infrastructure possible in the first place. And all goes back to morality. I've said it before, the most sexually liberated demographic in the United States are Black people, and look at the condition they're in. And the ones that aren't sexually liberated are doing much better. Despite whatever racism they confront or something, which means that it isn't racism; is their primary problem. Actually, that's just an excuse. But it's called practical reason. And so basically it's these rules applied. You can observe the natural law and know what's right and wrong, and you know what's destructive. And if you're going to argue against it, you're just simply trying to rationalize your immorality. Modernity is rationalized sexual immorality. That's what modernity is. It's all there to justify so we can go out and screw around. I think it's Bertrand Russell once said, a lady asked her why he doesn't do philosophy anymore. And he said it because I like to screw.
Nice.
You know,
You're hanging out there with
really? I mean, really, Birdie? I mean, you're getting old. Come on, it's a little ridiculous. I mean, it's more to life than that.
you're hanging out with Foucault
Yeah, it's like
in the
what,
bathhouse. Let's just
literally killing himself. You know?
I mean, I
Yeah.
you know, see the thing to me is that I guess maybe I'm just a dullard. I'm a laggard. I speak only flummery. That's near Walter flummery. But it's like I don't like I don't find it that interesting to just engage in this very, you know, activity that affects my body, that's just with lots of different people, that's supposed to produce
Exactly.
pleasure, like in these
Yeah.
it's like toxic cesspit, like breeding ground. I mean, could you imagine?
Well,
You
yeah,
know,
like
I
a
think-
bathhouse. You
I
know?
mean, what were those bathhouses actually like? You walk in there, they
Yeah.
play like, don't wow, like, what kind of music? I mean, but these were like, and actually, this is it'd be interesting. Like, what were those places like? These are like dens of inequity. Like, I mean, just I have no idea what they were like, but it was just like this insane. Of course, that's where AIDS came from,
Yeah.
or AIDS, and the AZT manufacturers and
Yep.
poppers, amyl nitrate, and just like you probably shouldn't have 50 objects inserted in your anus in a 20-hour period.
Yeah, you're going to develop some sort of immunity issue if you do that. Yeah,
I mean-
and you don't need an exotic virus to explain why. That was, the HIV thing was like, oh, really? You need an HIV to explain it? It's like,
I mean, what's this? I think when you remove the moral connection in your actions, where it's not, it it has weight, and
every form of human intercourse, be it sexual or commercial or social, has there's a morality to it. There's moral implications. And you can't separate morality from any form of interaction with another human being. In your business world, in your personal life, these things, if you don't prescribe a certain morality to that, you're going to have problems. Nothing functions outside. You can have all the rules in the world, you can have the perfect mechanism set up, but if people are immoral, it falls apart. It doesn't function properly. Because you have to be able to trust people. People take that for granted.
Well, I mean, this is one of these things. I'll just throw in another group decision making. So Kurt Lewin, AM radio, action research, insisting experiments are conducted in real time, in real communities, and researchers that actively shape outcomes. This goes back. I did a show on my podcast. My tagline is "The Resonant State, the world's most popular podcast." My last video had 14 views, and one of them was my dog, but that's okay because it's about the glory. That's finally I said. I just was trying to be optimistic. The world's most popular podcast. I'm like, my wife's like, how many times you watched it? I only did it once, but dog Yuki watched it and he liked it a lot, I think. But I did it on the Global Brain. The Global Brain is this is H.G. Wells' model of this interconnected, global brain, global consciousness field, global information network control, just an interlocked group dynamic thing. But anyways, Kurt Lewin, action research, again, infiltrating communities and changing them. This is what H.G. Lovecraft, H.G. Wells,
H.G. Wells.
H.G. Wells talks about is that he says, this is sociology, but the world is so, he's saying in 1933, oh, humanity is overpopulated. We're all going to starve to death,
1933. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But the global brain, like sociology should change the society as they're doing research. And that's what they're doing. Influence spreads best through networks of peers, not through direct commands. This is what it is. So we talked about that pornography thing, right?
Hmm.
People finding and again, this is a phenomena that this is like, it's okay. 10 years later, man, I'm going to write a book, The Porno Stashes in America, uh, what it did to my brain.
Yeah.
But it did. Like, I think, because there's some radiance of love you experience, and the act of sleeping with a woman, it, I don't know how to say it. It's like the spiritual beauty of that experience is hard to come by and easily lost, and should never be tarnished or thrown away. And as soon as you get this graphic depiction of pornography, because it debases the, I mean, you put your free will in the service of the bestial degradation of yourself and others for pleasure. You're going to sleep. I slept with 10,000 women. Pleasure. Okay. Like, why not work hard and do a good job? And you get pleasure. You may not get as much pleasure as a cocaine addict, but you have a
Yeah,
longer
yeah.
lifespan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you definitely, I mean, if you're just looking for pleasure or quote happiness as opposed to fulfillment and meaning in life, right? And that's another thing is people like thinking they should be happy all the time. Well, no, that's not what life is about. You know, it's the idea is to come into this world to make it marginally better to the extent that you can, and hopefully you can account for yourself when that time comes.
Well, I think, it's, you know, honestly, like, life is so much more simple if you don't do these things. You
Well,
just
that's society. I was thinking. I said, what if everybody sort of like followed the rules, right? Meaning they went to church on Sunday. They didn't eat meat on Fridays. I'm a Catholic, so I'm using these examples, and they abided by. They were faithful to their spouse. They followed the law. Went to work, did the best job that they could. Wow, you'd have a perfect society, wouldn't you? No, they got to complicate it. The authoritarian person has to complicate it, with these with the idea of deconstructing everything. And basically, if you do follow the rules, it's because either you're a Nazi or you're a budding Hitler. If you respect authority and all that, it's and then there's always you have to express yourself. You have to have there's the two spirit philosophy or idea of people, where you have where you're transgendered or something, or you're not who you think you are and all that because you've picked up on the media. It's being promoted, so you have the social contagion. Also, you have more people who are isolated, confused, live in broken homes because people aren't following the rules anymore. So they live in increasingly dysfunctional families, dysfunctional communities. So they look for identity that can easily be preyed upon, and they pick up on social contagions like transgenderism, and it's being promoted by the networks that you talked about. And that's demonstrable. Actually, this isn't spontaneous. There's funding for it. There's billionaire oligarchic funding for this insanity. That's why that's why we're even talking about it. We wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't being promoted from above.
But it creates such sorrow,
Hmm.
such unnecessary unhappiness, and things that you cannot return from. These are the thresholds. It's one thing you go, you're hanging out with Foucault, talking philosophy, just doing it, doing your
Take,
amyl nitrate and your massive.
taking acid in Death
I,
Valley or
I
something.
mean, just seems so. I can't. It just reminds me of like a fish market I saw in Thailand, like small, but they have all like these neon lights over the different fish tanks. And just really like was kind of grotesque. But okay, but what I mean, like just some, kind of rinky dink, but a bunch of, there's some fish, but it's just like these weird fluorescent lights, and that's the impact. But but what this is your life work, okay? I mean, and you know what? It's you have to try to come to some truth, and we don't know everything, but I think we have some basic ideas, and and then just to within the scope you have to do the your the best you can, and just the more you adhere to just being completely uh, following moral law, moral code, the more free you actually feel. That's irony, right? It's so much less effort. You know what I mean? You don't have like, whatever, you know, uh, but anyways,
Yeah, it's almost like more effort to screw your life with than just to keep it simple. You're right. I've noticed that in a lot of people. They're so concentrated making their own bad luck and screwing their own lives up. So you have to. It takes an extraordinary effort to do that. Yet they do it. They can't seem to, you know. Eventually in this life, bad luck will come your way anyway. It's just the way you have to go out and make it yourself. I've seen that so many times. Yeah.
but see, the thing is that even that's promoted, right? Oh,
Yeah.
well, you're free because you're pushing the boundaries. You're going out, and you're gonna have an affair with the secretary of your office, and you're gonna take her golfing, and then you're gonna have like this crazy sex escapade on and some dilapidated amusement park, and then you're gonna get caught, and then your wife's gonna divorce you, and your kids are and then you're gonna affect the family, and you're gonna affect your kids, and this will go to the next generation.
Mhm.
And for what? You know, I mean, people make mistakes. There are people that are evil. Well, of course, a lot of people are evil. But I mean, but average everyday people, like, I mean, just don't put this into the fragile mind space of the youth and influence the culture in these very complex ways. Maybe I just keep going. Real quick here. So we got, action research again. So this is psychological topology. He had all this graphs. It's all mathematical. It's all, and you have your vectors, you have your influence vectors, you have your command vectors, and I mean, it is some pretty brilliant research, actually. In terms of, most people don't know about this stuff, dude. But this is what is everything we're seeing right now is the same stuff. These magic tiny hat guys came, with these amazing ideas just to really use all the research on psychology and just turn it into, this horrible, um, you know, uh, temptation is one thing, but damaging people that are innocent is another. And inserting influence into people's lives in very vulnerable periods
Yeah.
is another. And what, I mean, anyways,
Well, yeah, it's the corruption of youth, which is something we see too. The deflowering of youth, the corruption of youth, the destruction of innocence. That's very satanic. And there's a very spiritual element. There is a spiritual element to this. And it's interesting. You mentioned all this money going into research into social control and manipulation. We see this in the works of Walter Lippmann, who thought Jeffersonian democracy, America was too big, too complex to be governed under Jeffersonian principles, had to be governed under, had to be managed and manipulated through imagery and propaganda and through experts. Of course, he was one of the experts. Of course, they all happen to be Jewish too. But space, what you're saying is modern democracy, mass democracy, negates itself because it has to be constantly managed and manipulated. So there's no free will being exercised. People aren't being informed, and this knowledge people have to be constantly manipulated and lied to. Basically, that's what you read it between the lines. And so so we don't have democracy. We don't have free information, institutions, and you talk about all this research that goes into deconstructing, manipulating, undermining the morals of people. Why is it you couldn't use all that research to promote morals and edify people, make them better? No, it's all about control, because it's all about oligarchic control of society, and they simply don't want people being healthy, being educated, because you can't control them as easily. You have freedom, so they'd rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. If you want to get to a spiritual justification, so we're back to Paradise Lost, which is the guiding spirit of the West, unfortunately. At least for the past 500 years. Yeah. You know, again, why everything, it's all geared towards undermining, subverting, manipulating. Why can't it be, get this information? Wow, let's make people a little better, because then you can't control them. You can't marshal, you can't muster them for world wars and dominate the planet that way. So it's libido dominandi, what we have here, the lust to rule. That's what I get out of it, because I do think, given the conditions of man, that the vast majority of people are not philosophers and not deep thinkers, that they do live prescriptively. But it's the duty of the intellectuals, the scribes, those with the ability to rule, to govern them, have noblesse oblige, and govern them morally. I don't think that's impossible. Why can't you do that? And they will rely on people to give them information, but you don't have to manipulate people. You can digest information, give it to them, that they can digest it, use it to manage their lives. But instead, it's used to manipulate, and extract and enslave, and that's basically it, because they're Satanists, basically, the people that want to do this. They want to control people.
Well, ultimately it is the worship of man.
Yeah,
it is the really. So
my point is, I'm a parent. Are you a parent?
I am a parent. I'm both a parent and a parent.
Yeah. You educate your kids. Yeah, you're guiding them. You have authority over them for a short period of time, and you want to educate them so they can be free and independent and make the right decisions, because you have to give them the guidance, and you want to indoctrinate them if you're like religious, and so they make the right decisions. That's why you have things like sacraments in their kids and all that. But you're basically you're preparing them for adulthood so they can make the right decisions when they have to make their own decisions in life, that they have the background for it. Really, people that govern a society have the same attitude towards the people in general, sort of a patriarchal view of these things, and they don't. Problems that's there, they want to exploit. I mean, I guess there are some dysfunctional parents who want to ruin their kids. Yeah, they're out there, I suppose. But it's certainly, why not take that approach? Because as we know, as parents, we're going to get old, or they have to grow up and have their own. And you want to see that and progress, next generation. They don't look at it that way, I guess. They, because again, to do that, they'd have to give up their control. And one thing I get through all the literature, all the stuff with FM radio and guiding public opinion with Walter Lippmann, or propaganda, Edward Bernays, the Princeton Radio Research Project, and the development of FM radio, is how it can be used to mobilize, manipulate, and achieve some sort of objective, social control through establishing networks of manipulation. You know,
Well, a lot of these are problems of governance, of authority, the loss of any truth behind words, right? I mean, we see all these manipulations of language, or this, that.
so it's nominalism.
Yeah,
Because like the way
look right here, man. I got the book. Okay, okay. I'm going out of the box. No. Okay, I'm gonna read. Here we go. Okay, I won't read it. I have a. Unfortunately, in my office, I got this copy of Mein Kampf. It's like sitting right on my desk. It just happens to be there. It is. I'm like looking at it. Mein Kampf. I used to do like a Mein Kampf I Ching. Must the military defeat necessarily lead to a complete overthrow of the state and nation? Whenever has this been the result of an unlucky war? As a matter of fact, are nations ever ruined by a lost war, and that alone? The answer to this question can be briefly stated, referring to the fact that military defeats are the result of internal decay, cowardice, one of character, and our retribution for such things. Okay, I'm not, whatever. Just random. I just happened to turn. I was looking for another book, and it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know it was on the shelf. Like, hey, welcome. I'm a distinguished academic. But you know what?
Is that the Thomas Dalton translation?
No, this is like this is somewhere in Rajasthan. I bought I was on some crappy train in India, and they have like the guys at like 2 a.m. like chai wala chai, and like books, we have books. And they'll bang on and they had this guy. They had copies of Mein Kampf, like these kind of mimeographed. I don't even know. It's like it's just like I was like, well, okay, it's like $3. I bought them on the in a train station in Rajasthan in India. So yep. But you know what? Whatever you want to say, I don't care. But at least look at, for Germany, what he did in the economic growth was staggering, right? The rest of America's in a Great Depression. They're taking cruises, for workers. Again, I'm not promoting this or not promoting, there's a, racialist philosophy. I'm not, on board with that per se, but I do think that like your ethnos, like, do you want to like, respect your race, man? I mean, race meaning that's a term, but respect your community, culture. Yes, we can go much beyond that, but at least have some grounding. But anyway,
well, why shouldn't a German state promote the interest of Germans?
And he did, but all people criticize. Oh, they burned all these books. Well, what did they burn? Look at the sex, the first transgender surgery, right? You know about that, right?
Well, they would have burned the porn stashes that afflicted your youth, right?
I mean, it did Berlin. It was absolute.
Yeah.
I mean, degeneracy for an impoverished people, like that is an affliction of unnecessary suffering. Epstein, we're doing some of these shows. We do them every Sunday night. This guy William Ramsey, a guy named Sean McCann.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking like, so a lot of times they end up being 3 hours. My wife's like, she doesn't like it. It's like, go to bed, get out. But it's like she's like, she makes these imitations of the way she says I talk, and it's not that complimentary, but so one of the things, this guy William Ramsey goes to like thousands of pages, but we're looking at all these FBI intake documents, crazy stuff. You can't imagine how many people were reporting stuff, and like super detailed. But one of the things that, besides, nothing that graphic, is that multiple artists had their artwork stolen and put with a fake signature and sold by Epstein. And they did this to many artists. They stole their paintings. They put them for sale with some, pseudonym artist, and they made millions of dollars. And then they just hurt these artists, man. I mean, and these guys are already worth like billions of dollars. Like that's raw, isn't it? I mean, think about a painter. You just did this and you see it's been sold for $20 million by Gonzalez, Giuseppe, just some name they made up. And they did this for fun. I mean, sorry, Tim, I went off you got a little tangential. I'll just kind of,
Well, I think it was Epstein who said this is how the Goyim have to work for money. This is how we make money. That was one of the things that were the Epstein tapes. Yeah.
Yeah. There's an interview with, oh gosh, who is that? It's Bannon, right? The Bannon.
Bannon, yeah.
Yeah. But we went to that video interview and he says, like, one point he says, "Hi, Covenant." But he's like, if you were the devil, like in Milton's Paradise Lost. So they're bringing all this stuff up. But he changes his shirt color to black, and he's like, and it's just like, there's the pleasure, like you get pleasure. Okay. If whatever, you get pleasure, but no, you get pleasure by the activity, but you get more pleasure by just destroying someone's soul. Like that's, I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like women go into pornography like that. You're doing something that there's a physical damage, but the spiritual damage you're doing is you, who knows, right? Very bad. But anyways, what's really fascinating about this, and I do find it, I mean, again, Kurt Lewin, like the psychological topology, and then with the Tavistock Institute, and then with the cybernetics systems theory of governance. This is governance, and the governance, the theory of governance is the primary. I mean, you can, using the cybernetic system theory, you can have impact over multiple, absolutely multimodal, which means like different, states, right? Media, publishing, food additives, I mean, you can have massive impact. Once you understand these the principles of cybernetics. But anyways,
one thing that was interesting about that again is the idea that you govern through trauma, which you destabilize society and you impose trauma on the society, which for most people is completely counterintuitive to their understanding of what their government is for. It was the British statesman Enoch Powell who said that the first duty of any statesman is the avoidance of unnecessary evils. That's a very idealistic view of government. But if you take Kurt Lewin and the Tavistock Institute and related organizations and the studies they conducted, is another pattern I see is the idea that you impose trauma and crisis on society to achieve an objective otherwise would not be achievable through normal political channels or methods. So it makes us, you have to start to look at events, big events in the past, whether it's 9/11, a war, or just a certain crisis or a problem in society. Is it being like crime, for that matter? Good example, the problem of crime in California. Ron Unz wrote an article years ago talking about the Jewish mafia in California and sort of the political elite in California, how one of the reasons why they might have released all the people out of the insane asylums, and that gets into Ken Kesey idea that it's the insane who are actually insane because our society is crazy. The idea they're not just insane people, they're just funny people that should be released. But one of the objectives for that was to create street crime and life so difficult on the street that people wouldn't have time to notice high level plunder that was going on. It's like That's an interesting way to govern a society. And if you have the juice or the authority or the power to do that, I can see an elite, particularly a hostile elite, that an ethnic hostile elite that looks at the most of the population as either ethnic enemies or just not, or cattle, if you will, would do that. You know, or simply is you create a false flag, or you let something happen so you have a war. Like example would be like Pearl Harbor or 9/11 or even October 7th for that matter, because you have an objective. So you want to create the shock, the trauma, the the catalyzing galvanic event of to have it, so you can have your war, a new Pearl Harbor, if you will, as the Project for New American Century said. But it completely flips the script, if you will, or idea of our governing institutions, not just government, but also corporate, entertainment, media. Because one thing I get from the article, and one thing from other articles I've read, is that these things are all intertwined. There's no real separation between these, the public and private sphere and media and all. They're all connected, which is why Hollywood would produce certain films, at a certain time to stress certain things. That's nothing new. Also makes sense of things like Laurel Canyon scene and the music scene, and how Lookout Mountain, and how Lookout Mountain was tied into Hollywood and the creation of propaganda films and military intelligence and photography and everything. And it's so.
Yeah, when the I guess, and I do not want to impose upon your very hospitable invitation to be on your show, but if you don't, I maybe appropriate to do, like, I could do a second part, because I didn't even get into the FM stuff yet, or no, if it's not, that's fine too. But this, when we hit, there's one thing, you have facts. You want to understand the knowledge. You want to also understand the narrative, and you want to feel how powerful these processes are. I mean, you know what I mean? Just to get the grasp of this. But, again, if we, by because what I started out saying is that, what happened in the, 3 years, 66 to 69, it hasn't stopped. Okay. But that was, everything else was a lead up to the deployment of all of these techniques and technologies, as well as occult workings. I do have to say that I think there's, there is a demonic or evil, aspect to this. I mean, this is here in your face. I mean, it is, and we can go on and on, but it's there, and whether you want to acknowledge that exists or not, this is a reality. If you ever have the misfortune of really learning that this is absolutely real, but the creation, you Joe Schmo, you at least start to abide by, the moral laws and codes, and really just make an effort in your heart to change a little bit. Your whole life will change, and it changes your perspective, how you look at the world. But people that aren't even open to that understanding, the level of disruption I think people are experiencing right now is just off the charts. And it's so, case in point, from the development of radio, you have these networks, you have virtualized networks, you have the understanding that you can create sort of influence modules, and in group decision making. So, like, examples, we're getting housewives to discuss new recipes together. So say, and how much this happened? This happened all the time. And a lot of times this is through advertising, right? So what I mean is a focus group. So you've got, your ladies, you're playing bridge. Do you play bridge?
Me? Oh no,
I
too
don't even know how to
complicated.
play.
I know.
I mean, I'm not that. I'm not part of those social circles where But people get really into bridge, right?
Yeah,
Bridge party. I don't know.
usually a couples thing, isn't it? So
Yeah, I
yeah.
think it is, and but it's like a very detailed. But anyways, bridge party. There's groups of them. You get hired two agents to talk to ladies and promote recipe book, new thing to eat. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so this again, just to stress that I mean, Lewin, um, like some of the research of a lot of these books are not available, man. But this is the same stuff they're using today with that whole AI fiasco. The AI antichrist.
Mhm.
um, but anyways, so action. What we're talking about, this is where it gets a little creepy. Is to think that you could be in your school, there could be friends, people, that are involved in this, right? And have you done that like a shopper? You're down on your luck. Like, I'll become a secret shopper. I actually done that a few times. Secret shopper, where you shop and then you're rating them or whatever. But how hard is this to infiltrate groups? And you can, but then, and they, you can, this is a micromanaged level, right? So the micro to the macro. Anyways, so the Princeton Radio Project, though, is really the culmination, at least of the earlier sort of media deployment, understanding exercises, right? And so the Princeton Radio Project, um, and Adorno's work is very important. Primarily, I think Adorno's work on the double mirror, the inner mirror, right? The inner mirror is a essential thing to understand, um, in terms of the psychological impact of mass media, right? So the inner mirror, um, this is, and the inversions of this, right? Like self-esteem, self-esteem. Okay. What everyone says, oh, I mean, you see people, looks like a great article. Oh, the self-esteem. Well, what was his number one? Maslow's hierarchy is what? The highest thing you can achieve, orgasm. So that's the highest thing you can
Okay.
achieve. It's an orgasm, man. Must be a pretty good orgasm. But I mean,
I don't know. That might be, building a cathedral or something. I don't know.
no, but I mean, this is so Maslow's hierarchy, the self-esteem. What does that mean? It means self hyphen, and the self hyphen interjection in the psychological research. If we start to understand how to, read their language. Okay. So this has permeated so many different fields, primarily from, you could say, higher governing vectors, right? Higher systems, measures of governance, such as academic research, such as providing grants to research certain things, such as, and so, we talked about the Illuminati, right? So the idea is that you have people in key positions, you put the nudge, right? You get a little nudge. Okay. And it, so, and I can extrapolate it from that, but the idea is that you can, this is what the radio showed. You can have mass deployment. So you're creating a field, you're creating an interstitial kind of psychological topology, e.g., Kurt Lewin. So there's also the fact that every living being is part of creation. We are all interconnected on some dimension. Our communities are part of this, just as a flock of birds is part of this. So this is invisible to most people, or whatever. But the fact is that you generate influences, right? You insert frequencies of consciousness, of action, of behavior. yes, there are choices, but you also give people lots and lots of choices. Oh, do you want to see this? Do you like that girl? You want this girl? You want to try that drug, this drug, that drug? So it's not just like, there's one time temptation, and we'll just keep multiplying that, right? Of bad paths, bad vectors to go on. But anyways, so it's actually super interesting. I mean, I got to say, man, they definitely knocked it out. America's like, America with the Gollum Trump.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep. They've done a number on it, and it's I think it's coming to some sort of culmination, I think, in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
'Cause
Well, and there's some things I wouldn't talk about. I mean, come on, guys. Like the level of, I mean, it's just these so that, well, I mean, this is our, we are guilty of the greatest crime of humanity because we have white skin and we did the greatest sin. And one poet said, there's no music after Auschwitz. There's no more music. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, anyways, so Princeton Radio Project. So this was where all these various researchers and a lot of people from Frankfurt School, as well as, Paul Lazarsfeld, and you have this also the introduction of sort of computational research models, mathematical models, variant statistical governance. So basically you can do it by the numbers and have impact. And so it makes things a little simpler. It may not be the same level of impact, but just like that, the mass marketing, right? That's an example of, okay,
Mhm.
like that. But anyways, Princeton Radio Project, they funded by the Rockefeller Foundation and Hadley Cantrell. So they also did experimentation with like light sound simulation, things like that. Um, and one of the, as I mentioned, Father Conglin, like the phenomena of Conglin, fascist, it wasn't fascist at that time, but that was part of the impetus, was also to understand the ways that radio could go awry, right? But so one of the Princeton Radio Project, I'm sorry, the H.G. Wells War of the Worlds just happened to occur coincidentally one
Mhm.
year after the founding of the Princeton Radio Project, and became the primary object of research of the Princeton Radio Project. Just an amazing coincidence, right? So, so basically, but the War of the Worlds really was central. In fact, it's kind of like, oh, what would happen if the World Trade Centers went down? Oh, they just went down. Okay.
Mhm.
And that was like the Princeton Radio Project. They're talking about not only interconnections, but creating realities, right? And the sort of the parasocial or the psychological typology, which is the mental representational space of the individual in the environment, in relationship. War of the Worlds showed that media had governance over, primary sensory and localization conditions, right? So War of the Worlds, it seems to me that was basically what the Princeton Radio Project was set up, was to study the War of the Worlds, but also, back to Adorno, the inner mirror. The inner mirror is a Lacan, from Lacanian psychoanalysts. This is where in the self there is a sort of a reflective modeling of the self, like say, like you would be the parent, right? So the young girl, like 2 to 3 years old, would see herself as the mother, right? So there's like an inner mirror that's like a
Mhm.
reflection back, and same thing with the the father figure, whatever. And this stage is supposed to end around 4 or 5 years old. Due to various factors, the inner mirror persists in a lot of modern Western societies. So in the inner mirror, when say for example you hear a song, you in your inner mirror, you are projected as the protagonist of the song, right? So you see yourself in this inner mirror, this largely subconscious. But the inner mirror is what self-esteem is. So I mentioned Maslow's hierarchy. The inner mirror is the Maslow. Again, everyone says, oh, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay, I know I'm not trying to swear, but I mean, come on, it's just complete bullshit. Like, first you have to have, if I have water, then I can eat. If I can eat, then I can go to the disco. I mean, it's so retarded.
Yeah.
So, anyways, but so the self-esteem. So these are things that Tim, did you encounter that like in school, like self-esteem, high self-esteem, low self-esteem?
It was being discussed a little bit at the time when I guess we were coming of age in the 80s. I thought more of it was in the 90s, really, after I had graduated. Uh,
Uh,
and I always thought that, well, self-esteem didn't always mean that the people were the highest performing. I think they did self-esteem studies. They found that black students had the highest self-esteem, but they had the lowest grades. You know, and as those who were obviously self-critical, question themselves would always trying to improve. So it can, self-esteem isn't necessarily a good thing. It's almost like pride. What do you mean by it, right?
well, no, we just want to say, like, much deeper than that is inversionary. So the self-esteem actually means is how you think other people think about you. That's what self-esteem actually means with a hyphen. Self-esteem means you look in your inner mirror, your Lacanian, because if it's a shell. It's this shell to prevent you. Either you go, anyways, that it won't let you go to your true self because this is a imposition. It's culture imposition, and so you're constantly these reflections bouncing off. So self-esteem means how you think other people think about you. So high self-esteem is, oh, I think everybody likes me. Well, that's what it is. The self-esteem is a split self, which is the inner mirror fragmentation, which is what Adorno talks about as one of the most powerful potencies of popular culture, right? So does that make sense to you? Like you look at how people identify with Madonna or Kid Rock. I want to be just like Kid Rock. I mean, whoever, right? The Insane Clown Posse.
Yeah.
But okay, anyways, so that's a tangent. So, anyways, Lazarsfeld, Hadley, Cantrell, of course, Rockefeller Foundation, and the foundations we know about Norman Dodd's, right? I'm sure you've covered that, right? Norman Dodd and the whole thing about the foundations.
The Reese Committee and all that, yeah.
But the Orson Welles, for people that don't know, and we actually went to some of these original locations a number of years ago, and I kind of initially delved into that. But so War of the Worlds, again, at least as the story goes, this was a radio broadcast that was. Oh, Tim, you want to say it? I mean, you know what it is. So.
Well, it was Halloween Eve, and I guess they were doing a adaptation of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, where there's a Martian invasion of the world. I guess that's reporting New Jersey, I think, where they're supposed to be reporting from.
Yeah.
And the story is that people, because it was on a radio, they thought it was real. And from what I understand, the study was it was intended to do that, but it was also intended to get the effects of reporting to people that people thought it was real. So, it's like, basically the effect of mass communication on society. I think it was just a way to create hysteria, prepare the country to get the country into World War II, that there was, being planned at the time, because that was a run up to 1938. So I think it's October 1938. So it's during Munich and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. So War of the Worlds, yeah. And so, and like, for example, Gordon Allport, Psychology Radio, it's,
because that type of reporting would be mimicked by Edwin R. Murrow a couple years later when he was reporting from London, and people were listening to the radio, preparing the country to get on the war on behalf of Great Britain against Germany. You know.
Yeah, no, so it's about, going back to FDR
Mhm.
and that authority, the father figure. But so War of the Worlds basically was this, it's a simulacra, it's a virtual event. It creates a panic supposedly, and there's all these things that happen. And again, and coincidentally, this becomes a primary aspect of the Prince of Radio Project's research. But it is very deep because, again, as you stated, and it was, and people still talk about it, War of the Worlds. And H.G. Wells, by the way, his that story, there's a short story, War of the Worlds, was published in Astounding Stories, the same issue as Julian Huxley's, seminal science fiction story, which discusses genetic modification, hybrid technology, mass communication, mass hypnosis through sound. So Julian Huxley's short story, which, sorry, I forgot the name. I know it's in the same edition that War of the Worlds was in, and they're both about basically the same thing. But anyways, so this created a broadcast that people thought the world is ending, or supposedly, and as you said, it fed back to the people that heard that, other people thought it was real. So that's the influence vector, right?
Mhm.
Other people thought it was real. I better think it was real, right? So these are one of these vectors. I mean, I think part of this is to, not to get too esoteric, but I think part of this is to take people into these sort of astral imaginary realms. So there's sort of an astral demonic aspect to a lot of this stuff. It's an overlay, not saying academic, but I'll just bring it up because I think it exists. And so I'll just mention that. So there's, a lot of sort of magical occultic practices. People, get into like, so many shows you see, like rock, like, yeah, I got possessed by a demon. This demon helped me write my songs. It's really cool. Like, this is a level that things have got to, but also people think it's a joke. Church of Satan. I'm a Nietzschean Ubermensch, and it's sort of Ayn Rand. Okay. Anyways, so there is another layer, which is, of governance, which is, really trying to import people into this astral, you could describe as, this is not higher realms. It's not angelic realms. I mean, it's just, but that's what the whole virtual reality stuff is, right? So this is this demoralization, but demoralization as in you've lost your morality, you've lost your center, you've lost your values, and you don't even know their values. So, basically, you have the two-step flow model of communication. So we're looking at, but I just want to stress that a lot of this is media impact on social groups, and then adjudicating or inserting agents of influence that will promote this particular vector of the media power, right? So this is an important model. I don't know if people have talked about it so much, but how about Laurel Canyon, right? You mentioned Laurel Canyon.
Mhm.
The freak dancers. Think about the freak dancers.
Oh yeah, that guy, that guy, what had like a Greek name or something? What was his name?
Vito. I always call him. I just think of the Zappa Vinny Caluta. So I Vito. Yeah, Vito, the depraved Greek who actually sacrificed his baby in a snuff film for Kenneth Anger. Which, okay, anyways.
Yeah, it's that weird thing. His kid dies. He goes out the night his kid dies. He goes out dancing or something. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, no. His so his kid, he was in a a film set, Kenneth Anger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Bobby Beausoleil was there, who said, he was basically Kenneth Anger's grip or lighting tech or whatever. He said, he did private films, and that was one of them. And so their son, their toddler son was dosed on LSD and on top of some, 50-foot scaffolding and fell as an accident.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's, that. But so this is an example of actually fascinating album Freak Out by Frank Zappa. This is the original psychedelic album. He's talking about the hippie generation. He's talking about, the hippie movement going through all the different cities. There were no hippies when Freak Out came out, right? But Zappa was there at the sort of the overlord, behind the scenes, sort of sorcerer, doing this stuff. So the freak dancers would show up to the shows, bird shows and various rock shows, and they would have, and he would have, basically teen runaways or young girls, and they have orgy group sex, and they dance.
People wouldn't notice that the music stunk because no one could play their instruments yet.
Yeah, absolutely. They all those things were done by the Wrecking Crew, man.
Yeah,
So
it was Ted Campbell, Leon Russell, and Hal Blaine. Yeah, the Wrecking Crew. Yeah,
they just these guys couldn't. I mean, yeah, and the thing was that, like, to notice, going back to the AM radio, so you can create genres, right? You create, for example, the social. There was a lot of shared musical culture and social culture between blacks and whites in Appalachia, and then they introduced race records and hillbilly music. So you got race records for black folk and hillbilly music for the white folk. There's a lot of quote unquote country or folk, whatever that was. They lived in the same environment. There was no, but that okay. Anyways, so that the Laurel Canyon, was here. You have the stuff. You go from now you're creating genres. Right? You create country music. You promote jazz, rock and roll. Also promoted by radio, and then you also have sort of the antinomian or the quote. See, notice the term counterculture. Counter, right? So what's counter? That's a opposing force, right? It's also like a countervalent. So it becomes like, if you look at a cultural orbit, you attach another body to that, and that other body, through its impact, will eventually start to govern the main culture, right? This is what 1960s did, right? So yeah. So I mean, but anyways, so that the freak dancers, there was no the 60s fashion. All these boutiques there was just a very few people involved. You got the charlatans, right, out there in Nevada, and they were like these dressed in like kind of 1890s kind of cowboy get up, and they had this, the bar where people would come and take LSD. And then of course you got Ken Kesey, Gregory Bateson's protege, master of the double bind, schismogenesis. Let's all get on the bus. The governor on the bus, right? You go, and then they show up and they're dancing around to their crappy music, and these are like 17, 19-year-old girls, wearing body paint or half dress. And the one thing is the dancing, dancing is used to be a part of the social order, right? You go dance, like waltzing. I mean, these are, you learn how to dance, right? At least you get a social skill. The freak dancing, dead dancing, what are people doing, right? They're just like in some weird, ecstatic, sophilistic, masturbatory trance.
Gyrating and that stuff. If they're women, it's interesting to watch. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's kind of just okay. I guess we just I could probably leave it there. I mean, I can keep talking, man. We get a double bind theory. It's just good to talk to an intelligent person who's not. I mean, I do think, you may suffer more initially, but once you get, on the right track and recognize it, wait, we live in creation. Okay. I don't care. It's there, right? It's in everything. We may not understand these things. There's a certain level of humility. You can have lots of knowledge of this and that, and technology. That's not actually wisdom, right? It's a technos. It's a variant of a hammer. It's a way to increase your power range as a human. But you know, it all these things are based like why do you want AI centers? Why the OnlyFans stuff that's going on. You're familiar with that, right? It's
Hmm.
just total degradation of these generations, man. It's just like, I mean, could you imagine, like we did our show 10 years ago, man? It's like 1,000 years ago. Could you imagine that schools would just be like, castrating kids and doing sex change operations without telling their parents? Could you imagine that would even happen?
Yeah, well, at the time I was saying eventually we're going to get to that, and we did. I think it was Anita Bryant back in the 70s, and she was campaigning against the homosexual rights agenda in Florida. And she said that if they do pass the Human Rights Amendment, they call it that. They always do that in Florida, which at the time there was a law that said that anyone under homosexual couldn't be a teacher because it's basically a morals clause for position you have over kids. So basically, society has some sort of moral sense about these things, some remnant of that as late as the 1970s. Of course, she was lambasted, and she initially was victorious in her campaign. They eventually did lose. And then a few years ago, I saw there's a teacher in Florida complaining because the governor down there, DeSantis, was actually proposing a law that would restrict what they could say. It's "Don't Say Gay" bill. They call it that. Basically, what the saying is that teachers, homosexuals, can't openly groom or talk about homosexuality with children. Well, things he was complaining, said he couldn't do that. Well, her initial complaint was if you do this, teachers are gonna start talking about it openly in school and recruit kids, and they're doing exactly that. So she was vindicated, although no one among the left is going to admit that she was right. But at the time, oh, you're crazy. They're not going to do that. Well, they did it. You know, openly grooming kids or recruiting kids in schools. And they do it to the guise of tolerance or sex education or some sort of a diversity or program or something, rainbow operation or something. And these are all of course, it's the SPLC and the ADL which actually sells education material to the schools to promote this very thing in the schools. That's one of the things the ADL does to combat defamation. They promote sodomy and degeneracy among school children, and they're tax exempt, of course, because they're a nonprofit. So,
But they have, thanks to Mr. Allen, right? The great lawyer.
mhm.
What a great conservative lawyer. Oh, he's the guy that legalized pornography. Isn't he right? I
Yep.
think that
Well,
he was
he also advocated the
Deep Throat, right? I mean,
well, he was the
showing in
big advocate
theaters.
of legalized pornography and also advocate of lowering the age of consent. I think to
Oh yeah,
12 or
yeah, he
something.
did that like just like he that was really pretty brazen and very tacky. I mean that was like I don't know why that hasn't been I guess that shows our society, but that his age of consent thing, like he did some op-eds as I recall. And it's just like man, it's really pretty sketchy. You know what I mean? Like this is something like where how did that fly?
Hmm. So, well, okay. So, where is the article published, by the way?
So
The
yeah,
FF.
this is a really I just want to give I have a hard copy of this this journal, and actually I gotta tell you it's a a great honor. I mean it's maybe not it's a reasonable size honor, to be part of this. It's
Mhm.
really it's a um So basically these are you know, as far as they're saying, you know, there's Brett Carlillo, and he's got another other people, and so it's a beautiful sort of an academic journal. I've got the hard copy. It's a beautiful magazine, Cultural Engineering Studies,
Hmm.
beautifully produced, and you know, it's sort of the stuff we're talking about, and yes, it's more like this. Like I said, it's beautifully made. You know, the articles, the men who would be queens, techno Gnosticism, transgender and transgression in the plastic arts. First article, FM radio, the Occult Frequencies Council. That's me. Pinocchio, a manifesto of occult secrets. So you know, a lot of it's, you know, relating to social, but taking people that are you know, coming out of academia, but we're just trying to, you know, apply that, you know, to topics that, you know, would just get you like tar and feathered, you know. They're
Mhm.
not like a, you know, they'll burn you at the stake, man. You know, if you, you know, but it's a, you know, so it's a wonderful endeavor, cultural engineering studies, decoding culture foundation. And yeah, so they have work there. And so I did, you know, like I said, it's just a nice, beautiful magazine, or I mean journal publication, and it's kind of a labor of love or passion. I mean, actually, the Brett, one of the editors, so he converted to a Greek Orthodoxy, and he's really trying to connect with taking academia, and also, like, you know, we're talking about, like, we have to, you know, not that you depends on my mood, right? But you can't. This is factual information, but I think we have to feel it, understand it, and, you know, at least whatever scope we have, make a positive impact in the world. But we also have to understand what world we actually live in. So yeah, that's the magazine, and my hansutter.com is like basically my music website, and then you can find my world's most popular podcast. Well, not quite. I retract that after 14 views. I'm like, and one of them is my dog, but it's still a good video. And
It's a good name.
I,
It's a good name for the podcast, though.
so I mean, I literally said,
Bandwagon effect. If you're into like cultural engineering, there you
so a friend of mine, or acquaintance, who does like broadcast stuff. So he was helping me like set up this, like, you know, hard drive array complex system, and so here's my Spotify. I'm uploading my show. So he has, you know, and he's got 433,000 listens in the month, and I'm like, I got 375. So maybe the world's most popular podcast moniker, believe in it. But anyways, so formerly the world's most popular podcast, The Resident State. So yeah, YouTube, BitChute, Rumble, Spotify, and you know, that's about it. And
go. Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll post this soon. I'll send you the link. And great. Good talk. I know it was kind of we went off different tangents, but that's the nature of these things. So I'll bid you good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Good night. Bye-bye.